I'm Michelle, and I'm the City Kids Director here at City Church. We care about your kids, and we want to invest in them even when they can't be in a City Kids class. So each week, we post a video lesson on our website on the City Kids page just for them. It also has some activities that you can do with them throughout the week, so go check it out. And now, your host, Maddie.
What's up, guys? Welcome to City Church Online. My name is Maddie. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you are a first-time guest with us today, we would love for you to take a minute and fill out our digital connect card, available either in the chat on the online platform that you are watching on, through our Facebook live feed, or you can visit our website, and we will donate $5 in your honor to a feeding center that we support in the Philippines. You can also feel free to reach out to us on either of our social media platforms, Facebook or Instagram. We just want to take a minute to say thank you so much to everybody that gives at City Church. Because of your radical generosity, we get to do what we do here. We are so grateful. If you would like to be a part of what God is doing financially through City Church, you can click the Give button on the online platform that you are watching on. You can text Give to the number below me, or you can visit our website. Remember, you are not just giving to a church, you're giving through a church. Some quick updates for you guys. We still have Growth Track available through an online platform. If you have not gone through Growth Track, this is our Next Steps class where you can learn a little bit more about who we are, what we're all about. So please let us know through the chat on the online platform that you're watching on, through that digital connect card. We will get you more information on that. Secondly, we continue to have city groups meeting throughout the week. This is how we connect and stay connected at City Church. We would love to get you involved. We currently have groups that are meeting Sundays, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays through an online platform. Please let us know. We will get you more information on those as well. And lastly, we continue to be a church that is in the city and for the city. Please feel free to reach out with any needs, ideas, or opportunities that you may know of so we can continue to serve our city well during this time. Thank you so much again for being here. Enjoy the service.
Hey, welcome to City Church. Sing with us.
All the sinners and the saints, all the broken and ashamed, all the ones who fell away, come to the table. All the lost and forgotten, all the weary and unwanted, all the ones who don't know grace, come to the table. I'll lay down, I'll let go of my own. I'll lay down, I'll let go of my own. All the sinners and the saints, all the broken and ashamed, all the ones who fell away, come to the table. All the lost and forgotten, all the weary and unwanted, all the ones who don't know grace, come to the table. I'll lay down, I'll let go of my heaviness. I'll lay down, I'll let go of my heaviness. All I need to know is I'm in your love now. All I need to know is I'm in your love. All I need to know is I'm in your love now. All I need to know is I'm in your love now. All I need to know is I'm in your love. All I need to know is I'm in your love. You're where I want to be. At your table I have a place I haven't made. Oh, my Savior, you are the grace that washed my shame away. It's amazing. At your table I have a place I haven't made. Whoa. my Savior, you are the grace to wash my shame away. It's amazing, it's amazing, it's amazing, it's amazing, it's amazing. All I need to know is I'm in your love now. All I need to know is I'm in your love. All I need to know is I'm in your love. You're where I want to be. At your table, light up the place I haven't made. Oh, my Savior, you are the grace to wash my shame away. It's amazing. At your table, light up the place I haven't made. Oh, my Savior, you are the grace to wash my shame away. It's amazing. At your table, light up the place I haven't made. Oh, my Savior, you are the grace to wash my shame away. It's amazing. It's amazing, it's amazing, it's amazing, it's amazing. Yeah. All the sinners and the saints, all the broken and ashamed, all the ones who fell away, come to the table.
This song is a song that I have not been able to get off of my heart this entire week, and it is just a reminder of who God is, what He says He can do, and that He has the power. If we'll trust Him during this time, He can take way more care of it than we can. Sing with us. How quick we forget the God who lives in every day. How easy to lose sight and you reside in the mundane. How quickly we forget the power that's running through our veins, the kind of power that empties graves. Oh, my soul, remember who you're talking to. The only one who death bows to. That's the God who walks with you. And oh, my soul, remember if He did it then, He can do it all again. His power can still raise the dead. Don't tell me that He's finished it. Lest we not forget the voice that's holding back the waves, was once the voice that told the skies to pour them into place. Let us join the endless song of everlasting praise to the only God who empties graves. Oh, my soul, remember who you're talking to. The only one who death bows to. That's the God who walks with you. And oh, my soul, you know that if He did it then, He can do it all again. His power can still raise the dead. Don't tell me that He's finished yet. Sing if He broke through the oceans. If He broke through the oceans, you can break through these chains. If Your words made the mountains, you can move them all the same. The
death fell before you, and it's still on its face. And the power that raised you is about to move again. If you broke through the oceans, you can break through these chains. If you would make the mountains, you can move them all the same. If death fell before you, and it's still on its face, then the power that raised you is about to move again. It's about to move again. Oh, my soul, remember who you're talking to. The only one who death bound to. That's the God who walks with you. And oh, my soul, you know that if he did it then, he can do it all again. His power can still raise the dead. Don't tell me that he's finished yet. He's not finished yet. Oh, my soul, his power can still raise the dead. Don't tell me that he's finished yet.
We have been everywhere. From the highest peaks to the deepest fathoms. We have seen everything, from the smallest elements to the farthest corners of space. We have built empires, defied gravity, conquered the elements. We have cured diseases, made a heart beat again, made the impossible possible again. Who are we? We are humanity, and there is no limit to what we can accomplish together.
Hey guys, welcome to City Church Online. My name is Drake. I'm so glad you're tuning in with us today. Hey, just a reminder, make sure you use that chat that you have there, whether you're on Facebook Live or on our online platform, and engage in community and connect during this time. Also, there's some things popping up. You can invite a friend on the online platform, which is a really cool feature. Also, you can share it on Facebook Live, and you can use this connection card to take next steps. Just no matter where you are and where you find yourself today, we want to help you connect and stay connected in community. Today, we start a series called Who Needs God? And I'm pumped about it. There's been this huge shift in our population over the last decade away from church and away from religion. And I've seen this, you've seen this, we know this together, that there's this increasing disposition in our culture that says we simply don't need this conversation. It's becoming irrelevant. God is irrelevant. Church is irrelevant. Religion is irrelevant. And to be clear, there's not been this huge shift in our culture towards atheism. There hasn't been this huge shift of finding atheism appealing, but rather that religion is continuing to lose its appeal. And now we're in the middle of this corona epidemic, and it's having huge implications on our culture. And man, just so you know, side note, we're still a church in the city and for the city. And so if you have needs, if those around you have needs, we would love to be a part of that however we can in order to serve those around us. And so as we have this conversation, I don't know where you find yourself as we come in today, but maybe you are coming and you would say, you know what, not only does religion not offer the answers, but for me, religion is part of the problem. And maybe you have some reasons and different experiences that have led you to that conclusion. Maybe you grew up in and around church or in and around faith, and at some point your grown-up questions started to outgrow your childhood faith, and so now you're left with the leftovers from that tension and that issue. Or maybe today you're tuning in and you're a follower of Jesus, and you would say, Drake, my relationship with Jesus is strong and my faith is strong, but there's still some unsettling conversations that come up both internally and externally that I'm not always sure how to navigate and deal with. Or maybe you're on the outside looking in and you don't know really where you would classify yourself today, but you're definitely skeptical towards these conversations. Or maybe you simply don't care, and as you're tuning in, I want you to know, man, I'm glad you're here. We're going to meet you where you are. We're going to have some helpful conversations. And so wherever you are, here's what I'd like to propose today, that maybe the doubts, maybe the struggles, maybe the issues that have pushed you away or kept you away from faith, maybe those things have done that unnecessarily. And what I mean by that is maybe the message is not the issue as much as the medium or the messenger in which it's been presented to you. And so in order to build a foundation for this conversation, I want to kind of backtrack a little bit and talk about this cultural shift. And so after the events of 9/11 and after the terrible tragedy that happened in our nation, there's a guy by the name of Sam Harris who wrote a book called The End of Faith. And this book really functioned as a critique towards all religion. And he submitted this work to 12 different publishers, and they all turned him down because there was this assumption and this idea that there's not really any appetite in the American culture right now after the events of 9/11 for any kind of critique against religion. And so finally a publisher picked him up, and amazingly, his book soared to the top of the New York Times bestseller list, and it stayed there for 33 weeks straight. And so the assumption was wrong, this thing blew up, and it got a lot of attention, including some criticism and feedback from a lot of religious leaders in our nation. And so then, in response to that, he wrote another book called Letter to a Christian Nation. And in this book, it's really talking about religion and Christianity in particular being part of the problem. That same year, Richard Dawkins wrote his famous book, The God Delusion. Now, this is a guy who's educated, crazy smart, Oxford professor, and he takes everything he's got and he aims it at religion. And here's what he says from his book, The God Delusion. He says, if this book works, you might ask the question, hey, Richard, what's the goal of your book? If this book works as I intend, religious readers who open it will be atheists when they put it down. And it only sold a measly 3 million copies, so it wasn't really that big of a deal. And then the following year, Christopher Hitchens wrote his famous book, God is Not Great. And the subtitle here was How Religion Poisons Everything. And so this new group of atheists, that they gave voice to, I think, what a lot of people were already feeling and thinking in our country at that time, and that was that religion is the problem. And for the record, there wasn't this huge surge away from religion, away from faith, away from Christianity, and towards atheism. There weren't thousands and thousands of people all of a sudden checking the atheist box. But what they were doing, there was this massive migration into a new category of people called the nones. And that is the non-affiliated, the nun-affiliated, the unaffiliated category of people. And so these people are not embracing atheism, but rather they are disconnecting from any kind of religious affiliation whatsoever. And it kind of it goes like this, we're not checking a box of what we are, but as a nun, we just know what we're not. And today, this category of people, religiously unaffiliated, the nones, they represent about 33% of the U.S. population today. That's up 10% from about 4 years ago. And this category also represents 40% of millennials currently, and typically looks like the educated, left-wing, theologically agnostic or apathetic. There's a group of people that says, hey, I don't know and I don't care. I don't wake up thinking about this stuff. And what you need to know is that for the nones, they're not hostile toward faith, but they're simply not affiliated with any kind of faith. And so here's the deal. Listen, I can't speak for all religion. I can't speak for all of Christianity. There's people who are way smarter than me having conversations that you can learn from. But I'm absolutely convinced as we have this conversation today that the migration that we've seen away from Christianity, which, by the way, is an enormous migration, that the fault lands on the church. And really the responsibility falls on people who do what I do and those of us who gather together on a weekly message. And what I mean by that is it's not the message that's the problem. It's the messenger. It's the vehicle. It's the media. It's the way things have been presented and talked about. And to be clear, it's not the nun's fault. And if you're a nun, if you fall in that category today, let me just listen to me. It's not your fault that you found Christianity unengaging or unscientific or irrational or unappealing. It's my fault. And it's our fault if you call yourself a follower of Jesus. And the reason I say that, before you start to throw rocks, okay? The reason I say that is when you open the Gospels, the historical accounts of the life of Jesus, and when you look at Jesus, who, by the way, is at the epicenter of all that we believe and all that we do as Christians, what you find is people who were nothing like Jesus liked Jesus. And he liked them back. And so perhaps if our Christianity isn't attractive, if it's not compelling, if it has no stick, then perhaps it's because we have the wrong version. And I say that because I've heard a lot of deconversion stories, people who are moving away from faith or moving away from their childhood faith. And as I hear the stories of why someone is walking away or why someone is staying away, I find out, I'm like, man, that's interesting, and that's curious, and that's fascinating, or man, that's heartbreaking, the stories that I hear. But what I found consistently is none of the reasons presented from walking away or staying away are actually reasons to walk away from faith. And so in this series, as we start over the next couple of weeks, what I'm proposing, what I'd like to do, is address some of the challenges that we're seeing here in this conversation, and if possible, correct some of the problems that we see in this conversation. And if you're a nun, if you're not a follower of Jesus, and you're just kind of checking in, and you're not sure where you land, I just want to invite you. Would you track with us? And I'll tell you my agenda. My agenda from the front end is that perhaps I can present Christianity to you in a way that you have never heard before. The version that Jesus presented. And listen, it's not because I'm smarter than anyone else. It's not because I have unique insight. It's simply because I think there's been a cultural shift in America where we have unintentionally embraced the wrong version over and over again. And what Jesus actually brought to the table was quite a bit different. And so today, starting this conversation, we're going to kind of have the conversation around the furthest regions of this entire dialogue, and that is what it means to embrace atheism. And so we'll have the conversation, Atheist 2.0, and these new atheists that I talked about earlier, they kind of fell into their new category, and they became celebrities, and they kind of redefined atheism, if you will, for our culture and context. And the reason we're going to have this conversation is not because you have crossed that line. It's not because you're sitting on the other side of this saying, hey, I'm an atheist, and it's not because you even have any intention of crossing that line, but because maybe you have unintentionally moved toward that line. And the reality is, and you know this and I know this, that you and I cannot move away from something without moving toward something else. And so if you're sitting here today and you say, you know what, I've lost faith in traditional faith, I've lost faith in the faith of my childhood, or I've lost faith, or I'm doubting faith in God as he's been presented to me, and I'm moving away from that the truth is, without meaning to, you're stepping in this direction. And again, these new atheists, they've redefined it for us. And so you need to know, we owe it to ourselves, especially if we find ourselves in the middle somewhere. We need to know what it is we're heading toward when we step away from this disbelief in God idea. And so what you need to know about atheism is a complex belief system that logically leads to some unsettling conclusions. It's way more than simply disbelief in God. And you should know this. Listen, not because the atheists are wrong, and for the record, today's conversation is not an argument for or against atheism. This is just about having a better understanding of what it means to embrace atheism if we're moving in that direction. And we owe it to ourselves to know about this conversation. And so just because something is unsettling, by the way, it doesn't mean it's not true. Right? To be clear, just because something is unsettling does not mean it's not true. For example, the coronavirus epidemic is a great one. Like, it's unsettling and true. It's widespread, and it's causing death, and it's destructive in a lot of ways. It's both unsettling and true. Or maybe a little more lighthearted example would be your teenage daughter's boyfriend. Okay, it might be true that she has a boyfriend, and then the moment you get to meet him, that both becomes unsettling and true. Okay, something can be both unsettling and true at the same time. And so just to be clear, this is way more than unbelief in God. That when you and I move toward a godless, creatorless universe, there are some things that we're left with that we need to know about, and it presents a different world view. So today I'm going to give you 5 things. If you want to be a good atheist, 5 things that you got to embrace. And the first 3, you might be sitting here and you're like, you know what, I don't think the world operates like that. As you listen to them, you're like, I don't believe that. But here's the deal. Listen, all I'm presenting is that once God is out of the picture, once a personal God is out of the picture, this is what we're left with. And it could be true, and it could be unsettling, but we should know as we have this conversation. So the first thing, if you want to be a good atheist, is the illusion of mind. The illusion of mind. And very simply stated, that means that there is no you in there. There is no Drake in here. This idea of self and me as I identify myself, it's not actually there. I'm just biology. The illusion of mind is simply saying that we're biology governed by the laws of physics, and there is no actual you. It's imaginary. Christopher Hitchens, one of the guys I mentioned earlier, he died in 2011 from pneumonia that was associated with his cancer. And in the process of the cancer and pneumonia tackling his life, the doctors would come in and they would tell him, hey, Christopher, your body is reacting, your body is fighting, your body is trying to do this, your body's trying to do that. And at one point, he just had enough of it, and he responded, and he said, I don't have a body. I am a body. And in this statement, just let it sink in for a minute. If I'm just biology, and you're just biology, then this imaginary thing in here that we would call mind, it doesn't actually exist. There's no Drake. There's just body. There's just biology. And so this is kind of hard to swallow and wrap your mind around. And so I've been trying to think about it the last few days. Like, what would it look like to live like this? Like, I'm just biology, and my wife Danielle, she's just biology, and my kids are biology, and there's no Drake and no Danielle. And so I've been trying to think about it, and honestly, it's virtually impossible. I can't figure out how to wrap my mind around how to live like I'm just biology. And so again, this may be true. This is not an argument for or against it. This may be true. We might just be biology tuning in right now to watch this thing together, but it's virtually impossible to operate like that. And here's what I know about you, and maybe we've never met, but here's what I know about you and me, is that you don't want to be treated as biology. You want to be treated as you. So that's the first thing, the illusion of mind you have to embrace. The second thing, if you want to be a good atheist, is the illusion of will. The illusion of will. If we are biology and we're all governed by the laws of physics, there's no room for free will and decision making. What that means is that you've never actually made any decisions. Everything's predetermined and predestined. And Stephen Hawking, who's absolute genius, he's famous for his ALS and an incredibly brilliant mind. He was in a debate at one time, and someone asked a question, and in response, he simply said, it doesn't matter because everything is predetermined. And everybody kind of like chuckled in an unsettling way, because it's like kind of true. Like, okay, choices don't really matter when everything's predetermined. And so then Stephen Hawking actually kind of pokes fun at this, his own idea, his own belief system. He's someone who believes in determinism, but here's what he said about the illusion of will. He says, I've noticed that even people who claim that everything is predestined and that we can do nothing to change it, look before they cross the road. And so just a funny little kind of poke at the reality of what it looks like to believe in determinism. And so he's saying simply, I've noticed that even though the illusion of will is there, we still continue to live as if we have a choice. But ultimately, choice is an illusion. And again, this may be true, but it's unsettling as we begin to wrestle with it. The third thing, and this is probably the hardest thing for me, is the illusion of value. If you want to be a good atheist, you got to embrace the idea, the illusion of value. And so in a world where there's no creator, there's no personal God, the planets and the universe and life as we know it, however it got here, there is no inherent value. And I'm talking about like value like money. I mean anything that you find of value, your kids, your friends, family, other people, it's all an illusion. All of value that we put on things, it's an illusion. And what's unique is we leverage the idea of value all the time. But in a world where freedom is impossible, so is the idea of value. Value is simply an illusion. There's no inherent or actual value. It's simply ascribed or assigned value. And what's unique about this conversation is that just is just as in justice, okay? Just is just what we want it to be. And so what that means is when we fight for fairness and justice and equality and different things that fall into that category, that's actually all an illusion. We're just making it up. It simply doesn't exist because value is an illusion. Again, and it may be true, but it's unsettling to wrestle with this. Now, the fourth thing you have to embrace if you want to be a good atheist is that something came from nothing. And this is one of the classic arguments of atheism. So you probably heard this and you're familiar with it. But currently there is no coherent theory as to where everything came from, right? We can get all the way back to the Big Bang and everything starts. Time, space, matter, everything is created after the Big Bang, but there's not really any language for before the Big Bang. And so when the Big Bang banged, that's where we're able to start, and we see some things come out of that, but the idea is that something came from nothing. And Richard Dawkins acknowledges how this is difficult at times, and he says that cosmology is still waiting on its Darwin, meaning that we're still waiting on someone to answer the question of why is there anything at all? So that everything is here is a clear argument, but where it came from is still a challenge. And also along the same line is we have to adopt the idea if we're going to be a good atheist that first life came from no life with no help. First life emerged from no life with no help. And for the record, listen, I realize you're probably sitting on your couch and you're like, man, I don't even think about this. This is so far from the reality that we live in on a daily basis that it's hard to think about. But this is the direction we're moving when we step away from the other side. And Francis Collins said it this way. He says that we move from lifeless matter, kind of on the front end of the Big Bang and evolution and all those things, we move from lifeless matter to the digital elegance of DNA. Just let it sink in, from lifeless matter to the digital elegance of DNA. And again, it might be true, but it is simultaneously unsettling. And the last thing you've got to embrace, if you want to be a good atheist, is that natural selection is responsible for all life after first life. Natural selection is responsible for all life after first life. And just to help summarize this from the God Delusion, Richard Dawkins has this quote, and I'll just read it for you to help us kind of understand this big idea. He says, think about it. On one planet, and possibly only one planet in the entire universe, molecules that would normally make nothing more complicated than a chunk of rock, molecules that would normally make nothing more complicated than a chunk of rock, they gather themselves together into chunks of rock-sized matter of such staggering complexity that they're capable of running and jumping and swimming and flying and seeing and hearing, capturing and eating other such animated chunks of complexity, capable in some cases of thinking and feeling and falling in love with yet other chunks of complex matter. And what he's trying to do is breathe life back into the reality that natural selection has brought about this process, but there's still a lot to life. And as I read this, I don't know about you, but it kind of becomes overwhelming and weighty. You're like, man, if that's the reality, again, he may be right. He's way smarter than I am, for the record, right? Like, I am not qualified, by the way, to talk about any of the things that we're talking about, okay? I don't have degrees in any of this, but this is simply overwhelming. But what I need you to understand is as we move in this direction, this is where we are once God is taken out of the equation. And he ends with this reference in his book to Darwin. He says that we now understand how the trick is done. And he's simply saying thank you to Darwin, because before Darwin, we had no idea how things came about. But thanks to natural selection, we now understand how the trick, if you will, how life as we know it is here. And Andy Stanley says it this way. He says his personal observation looks like this, that as we read this, it's really hard to think about natural selection without it starting to sound like an invisible, personal force with an agenda. He's saying it feels like natural selection is this relentless, can't stop, won't stop personal force moving us toward where we are today. And listen, if there's no God, then I'm mistaken. And natural selection is just a process or a force that I can't show you any more than I can show you mind, or I can show you value, or I can show you compassion. But natural selection is this process or force that's behind everything that got us to where we are today. And for the record, there's tons of scientific evidence toward this reality. And so the question that I'm proposing today is simply, did it have any help? And so if you're struggling with faith, let's be honest, that it's probably more personal than this conversation. That for you, as you sit and reflect on your personal belief system, you say, man, atheism hasn't become more appealing, but rather religion has lost its appeal. And so maybe your version, or the version you were presented with of theism, it has lost its appeal, or maybe it no longer seems like it could even be real. And maybe you lost something, but you're not intentionally stepping towards something else. Maybe for you lost, or are losing, or are simply skeptical of faith in God. And I want to do my best over the next couple of weeks to convince you that the God that you lost faith in, or the God that you're losing faith in, or the God that you're skeptical of and struggling to believe in, probably never existed in the first place. That the version that you've been struggling to believe in, that childhood God who never grew up, the version that you walked away from or rejected, not because you're not smart, not because you haven't been asking the right questions, but maybe you simply walked away needlessly because you've been walking away from the wrong version. So my purpose today was not to argue for or against atheism or the existence of God, but simply to shine a light on the alternative once we start to move in that direction. And it may be true. We might not have any will. There might not be no value. There might not be any oughts or ought-nots. There might not be a mind. There might not be a you and a me. But here's what I think, that even though it may be true, the reality is we hope not. We hope there is more. We hope we are more. And friends, our only hope for that hope is God. And so who needs God? Perhaps all of us do. And as Daniel comes to close us out and as we wrap up our time together, I just want to invite you to take a moment and respond, okay? So maybe you've been tuning in and you're a follower of Jesus, and you're freaking out because I didn't use the Bible in this message. And can I just tell you, don't worry, listen, we got you covered. That's why we got city groups. This message is a tool for you and me to grow and to be able to help others process the conversation around faith and existence in God. Maybe you hear this and you think, man, that's great, Drake. This is a great conversation and it's turning some gears, but what about the real-time struggles in our culture? Or maybe you're on the other side of this saying, what about the people in need? Like what about me? What about my friends? What about our country and our city? And you might be saying, where can I help? Or how can I get help? And I just want you to know that City Church is, even though we're having this conversation and having conversations around faith, we're still actively involved in the community around us, and we want to invite you into it. We just did a fundraiser helping out with some paychecks with our friends at the Rayback Collective as a church. We are donating currently $3,000 to our friends at Crestview Elementary to help with supplies and funds and food for families that are in need. We're doing a collective food and supply drive coming up on May 2nd that not only you can be a part of, but you can be a beneficiary of if you're in need. And we have a lot of other initiatives happening in and through our community and in the city. And we want to help you connect, use our social media platforms, stay up to date and connected on those things. But we're still actively involved as we have these hard conversations around faith. Maybe as you're tuning in, you need community. Maybe you need encouragement in this season. And listen, we have city groups. You can use that digital connection card in the feed as you're watching and connect with us. We would love to connect you in community and keep you encouraged in this season. It's for anybody on any spiritual path, no matter where you find yourself. We would love to get you connected and stay connected. Maybe this conversation was enough for you, and maybe you've been on the fence on this Jesus thing for a while, and maybe God used this simple intro conversation to put you to the place where you would say, Drake, I'm ready to start a relationship with Jesus. And if that's the case, man, we are so excited for you, and we want to help you take those next steps. And so let us know through that connection card. Maybe this conversation has kind of stirred up some questions and thoughts, and maybe you'd simply like to meet over Zoom and have a digital cup of coffee with one of our team members and talk more about faith and next steps. Let us know through that connection card. And maybe you didn't hate everything that you heard today, and it's got some gears turning. And I hope that you'll tune in with us this next week as we continue to have conversations around the real version of what Jesus invites us into. Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Hey guys, thank you so much for joining. We would love to help you take next steps. Click those action buttons and we'll be sure and follow up with you.